Welcome to episode 15 of the In the Name of Service podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Barb Thompson. Here, we broadcast stories of everyday men and women who've answered a call to serve in hopes of inspiring and catalyzing the rest of us to follow suit in our own way. Today's interview is with Ben Davis, former Navy SEAL and director of Veterans Outdoor Advocacy Group, or VOAG. VOAG's all-volunteer team works to enable access to outdoor adjunct therapies for all veterans in need by promoting the benefits of outdoor adjunct therapy for veterans, delivering research and advocacy, driving access, proving efficacy, and perpetuating the well-being of our public lands. Ben and his team do the work that most of us in helping roles despise. Developing relationship with lawmakers, earning a seat at the table in legislative efforts, and creating a way for those of us hoping to help to actually do so. Although he works full-time as a cybersecurity specialist, Ben is also leading a team of bright and driven individuals already successful in advocating for the passing of the Accelerating Veterans Recovery Outdoors Act in 2020, bringing attention at the national level that many veterans have been helped by spending time in nature as an adjunct to traditional medical and mental health treatment. Additionally, they have founded the VOAG Coalition, which is a group of partners collaborating to mutually support ongoing veteran outdoor experiences and to establish standards of quality and best practices for outdoor therapy implementation. If you would like more information on VOAG, would like to contribute directly to VOAG, or are a part of a program that would like to collaborate with VOAG, please check out the show notes. There you will find a number of great videos and also more information on one of my favorite projects VOAG has completed in 2022 called the 31 and 31 Project. This project focused on the men who died aboard a CH-47 helicopter on August 6, 2011, call sign Extortion 17. 31 Americans and 7 Afghan nationals were killed that night, resulting in the greatest individual loss of life for the U.S. forces during the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts. Over the course of 31 weeks, between January 1st, 2022 and August 6, 2022, VOAG and its coalition partners took 31 veterans into the outdoors in various capacities. These trips range from climbing, hiking, skiing, mountain biking, hunting, and fishing. All of the trips were to focus on remembering one of the 31 killed more than 10 years ago in the Hindu Kush Mountains. My son, Jonas, is actually named after Jonas Kelsaw, friend of my husband Jared, and Navy SEAL officer aboard the aircraft. It also holds additional dearness to me because of the 3 Air Force Special Tactics airmen also aboard: Tech Sergeant John Brown, Staff Sergeant Andrew Harvell, and Tech Sergeant Daniel Zerby, whose unit I had the opportunity to serve from 2016 to 2022. The call to action is this: let's get Ben and his team the metrics they need to advocate for veterans and the programs serving them. If you're a veteran or a care provider with experience incorporating adjunctive outdoor therapy, you can find VOAG contact information on their website. Thank you for listening. All right, Ben, nice to have you here on the In the Name of Service podcast. I'll have you start us off by telling us your own story. Tell us your background and what brings you to where you're at today in life.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. So I grew up in Blacksburg, Virginia, and pretty normal upbringing in sports. My dad was a professor at Virginia Tech, and normal middle class upbringing. When I got to the point of looking at undergrads, I was certainly not a very good student, but also not very interested in college. But it was sort of the expected thing for me to do, so I picked one. I don't really understand the University of Tennessee's admission requirements, especially at that time, but somehow I got in there, and I sort of went through the motions. This was actually University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, so maybe, I'll keep it to myself. But yeah, certainly I've since applied to college, and I don't think that they let people with my high school academic record in, but I got in, and just sort of went through the motions. I was just picked a major, and I was trying to fulfill the expectations that my parents had of me, and got through about 3 years of poor grades. And
that's a long time.
Yeah, it was a long time.
You got some resilience.
No, I think I got through like 12 credits in that amount of time. Ooh. And so I'm just kidding. I don't know. Anyway, I had been a wrestler. I had been a wrestler in high school, and some of my teammates and one of my very close friends went to the Naval Academy and wrestled and played basketball. And so now we're at like the year 3 or 4 mark in undergrad. And I thought what they were doing was really, really cool. I was like, man, I should have done better in high school. I should have, these guys got sports scholarships to academies. They're really on track to do something cool. And I thought I was sort of envious of that. So finally, or one day they tell me, hey, there's this thing that we're going to do called Navy SEALs, and you could do it. You don't have to come from the academy. We're all going to do it. It's like the hardest thing you can possibly do. And I wasn't doing anything. I didn't have any aspirations to have the sort of jobs that my classmates were aspiring to in college. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So this was 2010. So the SEAL teams were gaining some popularity in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, I knew what it was as a kid, but not really.
Yeah.
But it was sort of starting to become like in the spotlight a little bit more. So these guys were going to go do it. And I was like, man, I'm out of here. I'm doing it too. So
did you guys get in the same selection class or?
No, as you know, it's not super easy to like that process probably took me like 10 or 11 months. Of,
oh yeah.
Your eyes need this and your shoulder. We need to get your shoulder look, a bunch of just silly stuff. So finally it worked out and off I went. I dropped out, went to San Diego and hit it. And it was great. It was hard. Obviously I finished up in 2000 and the last months of 2011, I think. And I went to Virginia Beach to SEAL Team 4 and I was there for the next 9 years. So yeah, I did 3 deployments and went all around and it was awesome. It was great. I would do it again, or, if another 21-year-old asked me if, I would recommend it. I would definitely say yes. It wasn't without some pain, obviously, and some, hardship, but overall it was a great experience. Yeah. So it was at the end of my 3rd deployment. I married my wife between my 2nd and my 3rd deployment, and she was pregnant on my 3rd. I came back and I was just like going to do it again. And,
yeah.
I was going to go to the same place and I was going to, now it was like I had a wife and I was going to have a baby. A little bit of the mystery, I think, of it had been lost in the sort of whatever I was chasing.
What do you think you were chasing?
I just wanted to, I wanted to contribute, I think. And I kind of came in a little bit after what I would call like the heaviest fighting of the global war on terror.
Yeah.
A lot of guys that were like only a deployment or 2 or 3 older than me had really done some impactful stuff in Iraq and Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And we came in and guys were still going to Afghanistan and in Iraq really, but it was different. It was a lot more like partnered support, sort of whatever. And yeah, so I'd done all this training, I'd given like 10 years to this thing and I wanted to play in the game. I wanted to have an impact on the bad, evil people of the world. And fortunately that had happened a little bit. But to be honest, I could see myself becoming some of the senior people in the community. And it occurred to me that, maybe it wasn't a path that I really wanted to be on, or it didn't really excite me, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's a necessity. I mean, the teams are relying on those senior leaders to do what they do. So I really respect that, but it wasn't, when I looked like 10 years down the road in Virginia Beach and my family and some of the other stuff I wanted to accomplish in life, I just didn't see it happening by being in the Navy another 10 years. Yeah. So I got out and moved to Denver and I went back to school at William and Mary in 2019 and 20 and finished here in Denver. And when I got here, I had linked up with some guys who were also on Team 4, but much older than me. And these guys had moved to Colorado like myself 5 years earlier and had navigated their own post-traumatic stress and their sort of post-military life in the mountains here in skiing and in climbing. And by doing so, they ended up sort of becoming a resource for other veterans. My colleague within VOAG, his name's Josh Jefferson, and he was pursuing an AMGA guiding career, but sort of simultaneously was like a leader for the veteran community in mountain guiding in Colorado. So he and another SEAL, Dustin Kissling, got together and there was some legislation that was being put forth in the Accelerating Recovery Outdoors Act, which would look at the opportunity for the VA to prescribe outdoor therapy as a mental health implementation. So let's say you're seeing someone at the VA you're seeing a care provider at the VA for whatever mental health situation is going on. And this care provider has a list of pharmaceuticals or talk therapy or whatever at their disposal to help the veteran. With this change of legislation, they could add funding for outdoor recreation.
And was that legislation specific to veterans?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So this was in 2019. So anyway, these two guys got together and they said, hey, we've been witness to how transformative time spent in the outdoors is for these guys and girls. And I think, specifically as it pertains to the war in Afghanistan and Iraq and Vietnam and every war. But, there was something about the way that guys and girls went to Afghanistan and led small teams through rural environments, through the mountains on multi-day operations that really they found catharticism in outdoor recreation in the mountains when they got back home. So they basically said, hey, this is something worth fighting for. And so they founded the Veterans Outdoor Advocacy Group, whose primary focus was just to get this piece of legislation across the line. So I was super interested in it. I was like, man, this is something, like that outdoor recreation or outdoor therapy is definitely something that I personally engage in for my own mental health benefits. So I want to be a part of this. So yeah, many trips to Capitol Hill occurred, and it ended up getting absorbed in the Compact Act, which passed in December of 2020.
Awesome.
And yeah. So a huge win. And in the time and our efforts to get that done, the organization just became more and more robust. I mean, people really got behind it, and we did we've probably done 50 trips and events to sort of highlight outdoor therapy, adjunct outdoor therapy. It's important that it's sort of
like in conjunction.
Yeah, that's right. Because we're not trying to prove a new.
You're not claiming this is the end all be all. Right.
Exactly right. So just that time spent in the outdoors in parallel with other implementations is beneficial. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the thing really grew, and a bunch of different life circumstances happened with the folks who are in the organization. And I ended up being in the right place in life to become the director. And so now I'm doing that. And that's just, it's a nonprofit. So it's all volunteer. Everyone is a volunteer. So yeah. And yeah, we try to take on some other adjacent legislation we find to be sort of related to access to the outdoors and anything that sort of prohibits veterans' ability to navigate the outdoors or educate them, or
so that would be even possibly equipment or programs or
totally, or like using your GI Bill for outdoor vocations, or a more simplified, streamlined permitting process for hunting and fishing, or
that'd be so cool.
So we basically utilize the relationships that we made in that initial bill to take the voice of the actual implementators, the veteran service organizations who are actually doing the programs, everything from adaptive skiing to veteran elk hunting, and say, hey, what are your main issues? What are your main friction points? What is preventing veterans from being able to engage in this type of practice more, and then go to leverage those relationships we made in DC to help affect it. That's VOAG, and it's been a real honor and privilege, and it's been definitely therapeutic for myself to be involved with it.
It's just like such a good example of how we kind of stumble through life, most of us, if we're honest, into the things that if we continue to look, we really care about and are skilled at and enjoy, and that fuel us. But I have a lot of questions. What are you hearing now are the kind of common themes of barriers for those certain programs that you spoke about?
Yeah. So when the bill passed, essentially it went into this examination period, and we're actually on a task force that is tasked with providing an efficacy study or presenting to Congress at the end of 24 months saying, hey, this is or isn't viable. and is or isn't something that should be allocated budget going
That's
forward.
a tall order.
Yeah, it is. Luckily, I think the efficacy of it is enough to where there's not really anyone that's trying to prove that it's worthless. But
you still have to have data to present, essentially.
We do, but not consistent with like a new pharmaceutical that would need to be long-term.
So many random trials of,
That's right. That's right. I think, testimony is enough, and testimony from some of the healthcare and psych community saying it, not unlike someone who runs or does yoga or whatever. I mean, we don't need a neurological study to say like, oh, this veteran started exercising and now they feel better. It's if they say they do, then that's substantial, as long as there's no risk. But to answer your question, it's more in the how. I think as an idea, it's great, and it is great. It's something we should do, but in the, how are we going to ensure that this funding goes into the right hands, and how are we going to accredit these outdoor nonprofits to make sure that the quality of care and what are the best practices that these organizations are going to adhere to make sure that we're not putting the veterans at risk. I mean, are we just going to write a check to anyone who says they're a fly fishing organization and they'll take a veteran out? And
right.
And then also expanding to but expanding the reach to a really broad definition of outdoor adjunct therapy. So, we want to be inclusive of a Vietnam veteran who wants to walk in Central Park, or someone in, anywhere that outdoor recreation to them is a 10-minute paddleboard session or bird watching or whatever. VOAG was sort of founded, I guess, because we're SEALs in skiing and climbing and mountaineering, but it's been important to us to make sure that that's not, when a veteran thinks about, hey, is this something that I want to engage in, that they don't get this feeling of like, I don't really know how to rock climb.
Right. Like that just seems like another task to me. Mm-hmm. I'm not up for it.
Extreme, or it's like, I don't, basically people join the military from America's urban locations, cities, and they don't, they didn't maybe ever go camping or hunting or fishing or whatever. And so what can we do to make sure that there's equitable access to this implementation, regardless of what you already know about the outdoors, basically?
Yeah, right. I love that. And how do you do that? That's very broad. I mean, I am totally all for it. I agree. And in fact, even those of you guys who in the soft community, like you may have grown up outdoors and you already know intimately the benefits that you get from being outdoors, you kind of set that aside at some point in your career, and because you're just solely focused. For example, I was at a program just this week, and programmed in was a 30-minute walk, and the guys were like, okay, but then after they got back 30 minutes outside, it's like, well, how do you feel? It's like, well, actually, like, I'm more awake, my mind is cleared. It's like, okay, you think you can solve problems a little better? You know what I mean? Like, these are guys obviously still in, but I love the idea of access, right? That it's like, especially if there is some kind of either financial barrier or physical barrier, environmental barrier, that they still are going to get access. But I just want to know, I guess, how you're viewing that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's such a question that, Congress was determined to stand up this task force. So there's some really big players on this task force: heads of the National Park Service, heads of the Department of the Interior, Health and Human Services, the DOD, Team Red, White, and Blue. And what it looks like, I think, is for veterans to come forth and, hear from the VSO community and say, if you say you're interested in hunting or fishing or skiing or what have you, why didn't you? And is it skis are too much money, or I got on the website, I needed a permit, and it's like it was too far out, or, there was a reservation system at this park, and or when I got out, I really wanted to be a guide. I really wanted to be a mountain guide, but they wouldn't accept my GI Bill, or So identifying the barriers that exist, because rarely do we do you hear from someone that's like, I don't engage in the outdoors and I don't have any interest in doing so? I mean,
right.
Sure, there's people that's they're, where they are, and that's fine, but it's not common.
Right.
And then going to these departments and saying, hey, this is the feedback that we're getting, whether you think it's minuscule or nuanced or not, it's preventing access. And then also working with the transition process, whether that's the DoD or otherwise, and making sure that the education is there, just in the same sense of when you get out of the military, you're probably going to take some class on investing and 401k management and stuff like that, and not some class where you want to get out of the military and it's like, we're going to teach you how to camp, but sort of a message that, hey, look, you've had this community for 20 years, you've had a purpose for 20 years, you've had a challenge for 20 years, you've had accountability to your teammates for 20 years. If you don't find something that is going to fill that space, it's going to be challenging. And there's a bunch of options to fill it, the outdoors or whatever. These are the options. Because I think when outdoor adjunct therapy is really effective, no one says like, I caught the biggest fish and it was just so awesome how cool it was, or the whatever, it's just an engagement. It's something that's hard. They're probably accountable to the people that are on the trip with them. And there's, in some cases, risk, which people sort of miss, I think.
Yeah.
It mimics their service, or it mimics combat. And it's sort of nostalgic and cathartic. So, right. Yeah. So getting ahead of it, I think, really is the answer by sort of breaking down the why are veterans not more involved? And then having that setting the stage a little better for the transitioning person, so that they, are asking themselves, hey, when I get out and I get this job in tech that's remote, what do I want to do? I was shooting guns or, whatever the case may be. Yeah. Skydiving. And now I'm going to work at this tech job. If I don't find something to sort of fill that, hole, it's not going to be good. Yeah.
So how are you hearing from veterans right now?
So we have the VOAG started the VOAG Coalition, which I think there's about 12 organizations. And these are actual everyday sole purpose is the facilitation. And that's been a really big part of VOAG's sort of longevity, is that we have access to these organizations that are working with the veterans every day. Because we don't, to be honest, not that it's not something we're trying to hide, but.
Well, it's not something people can't be down and in working with a veteran and also up and out going to DC. Exactly. Like that can't, it can almost never be the same person. And we both appreciate each other.
Yes, exactly right. So that's been a lifesaver. And really, without that, I wouldn't say that we would dissolve and not have anything to do, but we wouldn't have firsthand knowledge. We wouldn't have credibility. We wouldn't even really know what to address.
Yeah, you wouldn't know what problems to solve.
Yeah. And so these people are awesome. There's an abundance of them. Sometimes we hear from veterans that it's a little overwhelming, the amount of do this
choice.
Yeah, right. But there's some really talented organizations out there that are doing some really good work, and they are all on the VOAG website.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll list the website, and then we'll list those organizations individually in the show notes also. How do you think the normal person listening to this, maybe they're not a veteran, but they're related to one or they care about one, how can they get involved in the efforts that you've got going on?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, the obvious answer, which when people tell me to do this, I sort of think to myself, like, yeah, I'll get to it, is communicate with lawmakers and mention, any sort of engagement with civic individuals. Doesn't have to be a U.S. congressman or senator or anything like that, but look at the access and the usability of the outdoor systems and places in your town and your state. And if it's, if it's challenging for you to navigate, then it's, we can assume that it's challenging for all Americans to navigate. And, basically just get involved, try to identify places where, barriers to access of the outdoors, and, be in touch with the veteran community if, that are the veterans that are in your life, and, ask questions. And I think that's really it. If I look 10 years in the future, this topic is highly regionalized in terms of support, and the office that you, or the website or whatever you need to access is sort of regionalized in your town or in your county. I think right now, in my opinion, it's a way to federalize everything from suicide crisis hotlines, and you want to visit a national park, or you want to visit a permit, or any of this stuff. Is like it just feels like you're dealing with like the massive DMV, and I mean it's sort of overwhelming. So I think part of what we want to do is transfer authority and policy design to the state and county level, and not just in outdoors, but also in sort of veteran resources. Not
right.
It doesn't feel natural to think like, I need help. Like, I'm going to call this national number.
Right.
Or, hey, my buddy's not doing so well, I want somebody to talk to. Like, maybe I'll go on the VA's website and call like 1-800-HELP or something like that. It just doesn't feel to me intuitive. And that's nothing again, the folks who are responsible for that, I'm sure they save lives all the time, and I appreciate that. But I think the more we can regionalize veteran resources, both for all things in life, but also for therapeutic implementations, the better off we'll be. So if people can affect that, wherever they are, non-veterans, that would be a big help, I think.
Great. And if the veterans in their lives don't know that they can ask their healthcare or mental health care providers about this kind of prescription to be outdoors, then there's that as well.
Totally.
How do you stay motivated these days? That's like the problems you've uncovered. And I mean, anytime you talk about changing law or anything really with lawmakers, it seems pretty overwhelming. So how do you stay motivated to contribute these days?
I think for me, it's it feels like it really matters. I have a 9-to-5 also in tech, and I think that this working with VOAG has been a way. It's been a way to replace a lot of the purpose that I had when I was in the Navy.
Yeah.
I think, when you get out, nothing really happens to you other than you sign your paper and you probably move. But, like at least for us, we're still SEALs, and I care about those guys as much as I cared about the SEALs that I was in platoons with. So I'm not any less motivated to help. And I think we're sort of in the second quarter of what's going to become the realized impacts of the GWAT.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. Yes.
Yeah. In terms of just some of the decisions that were made earlier in the war or later in the war, all kinds. I mean, we could talk about that for days. Just sort of like, I think the impacts, the concussion impacts, and sort of the acute TBIs.
Yeah.
Repetitive acute TBIs, and we're sort of starting to figure out. You can see with the NFL, like, it doesn't take a massive IED that sends you 50 feet through the air. A couple of small concussions can really become impactful, and I mean, just all kinds of things. I think that we're not in the micro. It was sort of like, hey, we got to do this and we got to get through this deployment. But in the macro, a lot of GWAT veterans deployed 4, 5, 6 times. I don't think I could be, well, yeah, I don't think that. I know people in Vietnam deployed 3, 4 times, 2, 3 times. But, I mean, you can find senior E9s and stuff, 10 deployments.
Oh, yeah.
Iraq and Afghanistan.
Very common.
You're talking about years and years and years of life in combat. And I also think there's...
we don't have a precedent for it. Like, we don't have another population we can look to.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, simultaneously it's becoming more acceptable to sort of examine and reckon with your mental health. luckily.
Yeah, thankfully.
And yeah, I think the community, the GWAT veteran has a sort of a level of unhealthy humility when it comes to raising your hand for mental health issues and for post TBI issues. I mean, in my time in the teams, there was always someone a little bit more
banged up.
That felt, there was just, it was just sort of known, like, well, tons of guys have it way worse than that.
Sure. Yeah.
But people, get shot and massive, people got killed. And so unless there's sort of a message like, well, dude, if you don't really need help more than everyone else, then don't
take up those resources. Yeah.
Yeah. Like save the resources that exist for those who need it the most, which is not an idea that I would disagree with, but I think a lot of guys had stuff that would be otherwise notable that they just sort of thought like, oh, I don't want to take from any care or any resources that other people need.
Yeah.
I think that's really, that's not a SEAL thing. I think it's from the most infantry, basic, infantry units in the Army to tier 1 operators. Something about GWAT veterans don't really want the attention on them when it comes to healthcare.
Yeah. And it's sometimes I think it's because they can't point to a specific catastrophic event. But until they get out and they start processing, because we try not to process anything before we're done, getting switched on. But yeah, it's really the cumulative effects of everything that we're finding is greater even than just some of those singular catastrophic events.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it is noble and humble to want to take care of others before yourself. But I will say that with the soft population you were a part of, and I've had the opportunity to work with, these individuals, like a few individuals can do the same amount of impact as a mass can when you're talking about these people. And so making the choice, not to care for yourself is also probably impacting a mass of people, or at least there's lost opportunity in the world because these individuals want not to create waves, and they're like, it's just a little bit, I can't sleep, or I get headaches every day, or like I'm hurting all the time, when I think it'll make a big difference. Yeah, and absolutely. There's lots of people out there, their whole life is fueled by helping. That's all they want to do. So really, you're being selfish by not letting them.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I think it just generally, veteran or not, I mean, every once in a while you should just kind of ask yourself, like, how are you doing?
Yeah.
That's not weird. So, for veterans to do that, they don't, if you're stuck in this cycle of like, oh, other people were way more affected by their service than I was, you're probably not ever going to ask yourself that question, honestly, because it's just through the lens of like, well, I had, I feel this way, but I don't, it's from this acute amount of combat, or this one thing I saw, but I know other people saw way more than I did. So I don't really want to, you just dismiss it. So you had asked me how I stay motivated. Yeah. I think that, it feels like we're sort of on the cusp of some real progress and some real lessons learned about what can, affect the next generation and sort of redefine what navigating one's mental health can look like. So I think it's awesome. People have certainly helped me, and I'm definitely energized to help other people. What have you learned about healing since you've started your journey with VOAG? It's definitely comprehensive. It's not there's no fix all. I think it's just outdoor adjunct therapy is just an option of many. And what the real issue is that there's not a ton of optionality that the VA can support. And so I think if you were capable of prescribing pharmaceuticals and you had lunch with your best friend, you would listen to them, and then you wouldn't just say, like, you would just think through the list of pharmaceuticals that might have an impact on them. Right. They're your best friends. So you would just listen about their relationships and their job and this and that and this. And then you say, like, we should go on vacation, or we should plan a camping trip, or we should like, man, I've been going to this yoga class or whatever, and it's really helped me, or you should read this book. And I think we need more of that in the systemic healthcare space. Mm-hmm. So more of a comprehensive look at the veteran and sort of the ability for the care provider to support more implementations that aren't so, physiological, like psychiatric implementations. And people definitely need those, in my opinion. And VOAG has never had any out with the drugs, in with the nature agenda at all. We just want to say, allow the nature to sit at the table.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I've learned, there's a lot of people in this space, and a lot of like, oh, this is what you got to do. And, every podcast you can find is like, oh, you got to like get your hormones fixed, and
right.
You got to like drink a gallon of water, just drink a gallon of water, or, whatever. I mean, there's like tons of, you're about one step away from being like totally happy advice. And so, yeah, what I've learned is like, I don't think that's real. I mean, I think it's like a journey, and you've got to kind of like keep the boat just keep going in the right direction. Vice, all you got to do is go skiing this many days a year and you'll be happy, which is a technique that I've tried.
Yeah.
I've tried about 3 winters now, and it does help. So
yeah, for some people it's skiing, other people it's golf. You never know. Yeah, that's right. I've never seen anyone healed exactly the same way as someone else. Never have.
Right.
And there's got to be more. So, and I think it does have to come outside of the traditional medical model. In soft units, there's PODIF, and it is like this multidisciplinary model. And you come to just know that, like, I, as a provider, I provide a certain thing, but like referrals, I'm a referral machine, because everybody does. They heal in different ways, but so amazing to have some kind of other option out there. Especially for a population who just so happens probably really enjoys being outside, even if they don't care about, serotonin and how it helps you sleep. Yeah. Well, what advice, I'll ask you one more question, and then I'll thank you for your time, because you've given me too much already today. But what advice do you have for someone out there who, say, they kind of feel a call to contribute, similar to you, maybe not focused on the military, but let's just say they feel a call to contribute, but they don't know how or where to get started? I
would say, I think the most meaningful solutions and offerings and advice or support that comes out of this space are from people that are really introspective, and they really can articulate their own struggles and their own experience, and identify the way they feel or felt, and then try to eliminate, in our case, veterans, from repeating the same pain. So if I wanted to, start over in this space, I think I would just, be really honest with myself about my own experience and the experience of my three or four closest SEAL buddies, and then build something upon the hardest parts of that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, I don't know how the best to say it, but like, sometimes people in this space will like kind of overweight volume, or they'll cling to something that is pretty saturated, but everyone needs, whether that's resume help but the folks that I see doing the most meaningful and like sort of the most resounding work, I think, are people that are coming up with a way to prevent future veterans from experiencing a component of either the post-combat experience, the transition experience, or post-military life experience, and they want to prevent the future veterans from going through what they did. So my advice would be to, just think about your own experience, like when you got back from the 3 months that you got back from combat, or the first year that you were out of the military, or where you saw a talk therapist at the VA for a year. What was that like? What was it? How did it help? How did it not help? What was the issue with it? What could be better? And then I think if enough people do that across the community, then, we just start to eliminate
those pain points.
Yeah, one by one. And then it's a little bit smoother for the next to have, for the next generation.
Yeah. I love that advice too, because it kind of puts purpose to your pain. Like it allows you to kind of step back from your own experience. So thank you. Yeah. Or just, like it helps get you out of your painful period by thinking like, okay, if I can successfully navigate this, then I have there is fire, there's fuel for my fire now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And if you've gone through it, then it's real. You're not speculating a problem. You're not trying to guess what other people are going through.
Exactly. Well, Ben, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to put all of the goodness
and for what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to.
That's awesome.
And continue doing what you're doing. I'm going to leave a lot of the information in the show notes. I'll leave it very detailed. You guys also have some really cool YouTube videos out there that are kind of like documentary-ish that I think really will draw people's attention. So thanks for all you're doing. Appreciate that. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.